Chapter 11 of the Riddle of the Sands. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Gesine. The Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Childers. Chapter 11. The Pathfinders. In the late afternoon of the second day, our flotilla reached the Elbe at Brunsbüttel and ranged up in the inner basin, while a big liner, whimpering like a fretful baby, was tenderly nursed into the lock. During the delay, Davies left me in charge, and bolted off with an oil can and a milk jug. An official in uniform was passing along the quay from vessel to vessel, countersigning papers. I went up to meet him with our receipt for dues, which he signed carelessly. Then he paused and muttered, "Dolci bella," scratching his head. That was the name. "English?" he asked. "Yes." "Little lust cutter, that is so. There was an inquiry for you." "Whom from?" "A friend of yours, from a big barge yacht." "Oh, I know, she went on to Hamburg, I suppose." "No such luck, Captain, she was outward bound." What did the man mean? He seemed so vastly amused by something. "When was this, about 3 weeks ago?" I asked, indifferently. 3 weeks! It was the day before yesterday. What a pity to miss him by so little." He chuckled and winked. "Did he leave any message?" I asked. "It was a lady who inquired," whispered the fellow, sniggering. "Oh, really?" I said, beginning to feel highly absurd, but keenly curious. "And she inquired about the Dulcibella?" "Herrgott, she was difficult to satisfy. Stood over me while I searched the books. 'A very little one,' she kept saying, and 'Are you sure all the names are here?' I saw her into her kleine Boot, and she rowed away in the rain. No, she left no message. It was dirty weather for a young Fräulein to be out alone in." "Ach, she was safe enough, though. To see her crossing the Elbe in a chop of tide was a treat." "And the yacht went on down the river? Where was she bound to?" "How do I know? Bremen, Wilhelmshaven, Emden, somewhere in the North Sea, too far for you." "I don't know about that," said I, bravely. "Ach, you will not follow in that! Are you not bound to Hamburg? It seems a pity to have missed them. Think twice, Captain. There are plenty of pretty girls in Hamburg. But you English will do anything. Well, viel Glück." He moved on, chuckling, to the next boat. Davies soon returned with his cans and an armful of dark, rye loaves, just in time, for, the liner being through, the flotilla was already beginning to jostle into the lock, and Bartels was growing impatient. "They'll last 10 days," he said, as we followed the throng, still clinging like a barnacle to the side of the Johannes. We spent the few minutes while the dock was emptied in a farewell talk to Bartels. Karl had hitched their main halyard onto the windlass, and was grinding at it in an acharnement of industry, his shock head jerking and his grubby face perspiring. Then the lock gates opened, and so, in a babel of shouting, whining of blocks, and creaking of spars, our whole company was split out into the dingy bosom of the Elbe. The Johannes gathered way under wind and tide, and headed for midstream. A last shake of the hand, and Bartels reluctantly slipped the head rope, and we drifted apart. "Gute Reise, gute Reise!" It was no time for regretful gazing, for the flood tide was sweeping us up and out, and it was not until we had set the foresail, edged into a shallow bight, and let go our anchor, that we had leisure to think of him again; but by that time his and the other craft were shades in the murky east. We swung close to a glacis of smooth blue mud, which sloped up to a weed-grown dyke; behind lay the same flat country, colourless, humid; and opposite us, 2 miles away, scarcely visible in the deepening twilight, ran the outline of a similar shore. Between rolled the turgid Elbe. The Styx flowing through Tartarus, I thought to myself, recalling some of our Baltic anchorages. I told my news to Davies as soon as the anchor was down, instinctively leaving the sex of the inquirer to the last, as my informant had done. "The Medusa called yesterday?" he interrupted. "And outward bound? That's a rum thing. Why didn't he inquire when he was going up?" "It was a lady," and I dryly related the official's story, very busy with the deck broom the while. "We're all square now, aren't we?" I ended. "I'll go below and light the stove." Davies had been engaged in fixing up the riding light. When I last saw him he was so engaged, but motionless, the lantern under his left arm, and his right hand grasping the forestay and the half-knotted lanyard, his eyes staring fixedly down the river, a strange look in his face, half exultant, half perplexed. When he joined me and spoke, he seemed to be concluding a difficult argument. "Anyway, it proves," he said, "that the Medusa has gone back to Norderney. That's the main thing." "Probably," I agreed, "but let's sum up all we know. First, it's certain that nobody we've met as yet has any suspicion of us." "I told you he did it off his own bat," threw in Davies. "Or, secondly, of him. If he's what you think, it's not known here." "I can't help that." "Thirdly, he inquires for you on his way back from Hamburg, 3 weeks after the event. It doesn't look as if he had meant to dispose of you. He sends his daughter, too, a curious proceeding under the circumstances. Perhaps it's all a mistake." "It's not a mistake," said Davies, half to himself. "But did he send her? He'd have sent one of his men. He can't be on board at all." This was a new light. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He must have left the yacht when he got to Hamburg. Some other devil's work, I suppose. She's being sailed back now, and passing here. Oh, I see. It's a private supplementary inquiry." "That's a long name to call it." "Will the girl sail back alone with the crew?" "She's used to the sea, and perhaps she isn't alone. There was that stepmother. But it doesn't make ha'porth of difference to our plans. We'll start on the ebb tomorrow morning." We were busier than usual that night, reckoning stores, tidying lockers, and securing movables. "We must economise," said Davies, "for all the world as though we were castaways on a raft. It's a wretched thing to have to land somewhere to buy oil," was a favourite observation of his. Before getting to sleep I was made to recognise a new factor in the conditions of navigation, now that the tideless Baltic was left behind us. A strong current was sluicing past our sides, and at the 11th hour I was turned out, clad in pyjamas and oilskins, a horrible combination, to assist in running out a kedge or spare anchor. "What's kedging off?" I asked, when we were tucked up again. "Oh, it's when you run aground. You have to... but you'll soon learn all about it." I steeled my heart for the morrow. So behold us, then, at 8 o'clock on 5th of October, standing down the river towards the fields of our first labours. It is 15 miles to the mouth, drab, dreary miles, like the dullest reaches of the lower Thames, but scenery was of no concern to us, and a southwesterly breeze blowing out of a grey sky kept us constantly on the verge of reefing. The tide as it gathered strength swept us down with a force attested by the speed with which the buoys came in sight, nodded above us, and passed, each boiling in its eddy of dirty foam. I scarcely noticed at first, so calm was the water and so regular were the buoys, like milestones along a road, that the northern line of coast was rapidly receding, and that the river was coming to be but a belt of deep water skirting a vast estuary, 3, 7, 10 miles broad, till it merged in open sea. "Why, we're at sea!" I suddenly exclaimed, "after an hour's sailing." "Just discovered that?" said Davies, laughing.